The United States has initiated a significant move in the Middle East, withdrawing some of its diplomats and military families from key locations including Iraq, Bahrain, and potentially other sensitive sites across the region. This decision comes not lightly, but as a direct response to growing intelligence assessments warning of credible and potentially imminent threats from Iran and its network of proxy militias. These developments have raised alarm bells within the Pentagon and the State Department, who now believe that both diplomatic and military personnel could be targeted in the coming days or weeks. Officials describe the move as a precautionary step, one aimed at minimizing risks, but the broader message is clear. Washington is bracing for turbulence, possibly a larger escalation that could engulf much of the region. What's behind this latest escalation? For months, tensions between the United States and Iran have been mounting. Iran has been under severe economic strain due to sanctions and international isolation. In response, its leaders have ramped up their nuclear program, resumed high-level uranium enrichment, and expanded support for allied militias operating in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. But the shift has not just been in policy, it's been on the battlefield. Over the last few weeks, U.S. military outposts in northern Iraq and eastern Syria have come under repeated fire. Rocket attacks, drone swarms, and indirect fire assaults have grown in both frequency and accuracy. In some cases, U.S. bases have been narrowly spared from serious casualties. In others, American personnel have been injured. The groups responsible? Largely Iran-aligned Shiite militias, who have vowed to retaliate against what they see as U.S. and Israeli aggression in the region. And it's not just soldiers who are at risk. Diplomatic compounds, traditionally protected by international law, are increasingly in the crosshairs. Intelligence gathered by U.S. and allied sources reportedly indicates that certain groups are planning operations aimed specifically at American diplomats, with tactics that could include car bombs, surveillance and snatch missions, and even assassination attempts. The urgency of the threat has prompted Washington to act, not by launching missiles, but by removing people. Diplomats and their families, military dependents, all are being flown out of high-risk zones in a quiet, careful drawdown. The U.S. embassies remain open, for now, but under a skeleton staff. This is not a full evacuation, but it's far from routine. So, why now? Several factors are converging. First, there is growing concern over Iran's broader regional posture. Tehran has been emboldened by global distractions, from the war in Ukraine to economic uncertainty in the West, and it appears more willing than ever to flex its influence. Its elite Quds force, part of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, has reportedly stepped up arms transfers to proxy forces, including advanced drones, guided munitions, and training in guerrilla warfare. Second, regional actors sympathetic to Iran, such as the Houthis in Yemen and Hezbollah in Lebanon, are becoming increasingly aggressive. In the Red Sea, shipping lanes vital to global commerce have been harassed by drone and missile attacks launched from Houthi-controlled territory. In Syria and Iraq, Iranian-backed groups are regrouping after years of US-led counterinsurgency efforts. The regional chessboard is shifting, and Washington knows it. Strategically, the United States finds itself in a bind. On one hand, it seeks to maintain its presence in the Middle East as a stabilizing force, reassuring allies like Israel, Jordan, and the Gulf states that it remains committed. On the other hand, with growing threats to its people on the ground, Washington must weigh whether the risks outweigh the rewards. Pulling diplomats and families out may be a tactical decision, designed to prevent casualties and avoid a repeat of past crises. But it could also send a message of vulnerability, one that adversaries may interpret as retreat. At home, the Biden administration is walking a political tightrope. Critics argue that the United States' posture toward Iran has been inconsistent, swinging between diplomacy and deterrence without a clear strategy. Supporters contend that these moves are prudent, responsible, and necessary to protect American lives. Meanwhile, within the military, there is concern that U.S. forces in the region, especially those stationed in so-called temporary or advisory roles, may soon face a more dangerous and complex battlefield. Already, the Pentagon is reviewing force protection levels, considering repositioning assets, and even floating the possibility of new deployments to bolster vulnerable positions. Internationally, the reaction has been swift. NATO allies have been briefed. European embassies are conducting their own threat assessments. Oil markets have begun to reflect geopolitical jitters, with prices spiking amid fears that a broader conflict could erupt near the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow maritime choke point through which over 20% of the world's oil flows. Israel, a key U.S. ally and longtime adversary of Iran, has reportedly increased alert levels and deployed additional intelligence assets to monitor Iranian activities across the region. The Gulf monarchies, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, are watching closely, wary of being caught in the crossfire, yet also concerned that a perceived American pullback could leave them more exposed to Tehran's ambitions. And what about diplomacy? Efforts to revive elements of the 2015 Iran nuclear agreement have largely stalled. European mediators continue to encourage dialogue, but Iran's recent actions, particularly its enrichment of uranium beyond civilian thresholds, have made trust nearly impossible to rebuild. The United States insists that it remains open to a diplomatic resolution, but also warns that all options remain on the table, a phrase that echoes through the halls of Washington whenever force becomes a possibility. For now, the hope is that this recalibration of presence, pulling some people out while reinforcing security for those who remain, will help avoid provocation and buy time. But history tells us that tension left unchecked in this part of the world rarely fades on its own. As the sun rises across the deserts of Iraq, the mountains of Iran, and the waters of the Gulf, one thing is clear: the Middle East remains a cauldron of unresolved conflict and shifting alliances. The U.S. may be stepping back, just a little, but all eyes are now watching to see whether this is a pause before peace, or the calm before a far more dangerous storm.